In the mid-90s, a group of teenagers from Indiana and Kentucky created one of rock's most unique sounds, blending acoustic guitars with dark, heavy arrangements that defied genres. Led by enigmatic frontman Travis Meeks, Days of the New emerged from troubled childhoods with basement recordings to create a platinum-selling debut album that also set a Billboard record that stood the test of time for years. Not just that, but Billboard proclaimed one of the songs off the group's debut album to be one of the greatest of all time. Days of the New's first album is a story about incredible talent, intense personal struggles, and a sound that found many fans. You can't really understand Travis Meeks without first knowing the story of his father, Gary. Frontman Travis Meeks grew up in Charlestown, Indiana, which was separated from his future home of Louisville, Kentucky by the Ohio River. Meeks' father, Gary, was a musician himself who recorded with the Box Tops, which was fronted by Alex Chilton. Gary even at one point was signed to RCA Records, but his career was short-lived as he struggled with substance abuse from the age of 15 to 26, and at one point he lived in a van. Gary, though, bonded with his son over their mutual love of Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd. His father, at the age of 13, started playing guitar professionally, and it was a Louisville, Kentucky DJ who worked at WAKY who took notice of him. The DJ knew people in Memphis who worked in the music industry and opened doors for Gary, who started to work in the studio as young as 16. By the middle of the 70s, Gary's manager was urging the young musician to relocate to Nashville and try a stab at being a country artist. Gary told Leo Weekly, at that time in 1974, all the Memphis guys moved to Nashville, and it ultimately led to the Nashville sound. I wanted to rock and roll and wasn't much interested in Nashville at the time. The Memphis thing was more rock and blues. By 19, Gary was working as a touring musician, but he also took a liking to alcohol. He ended up marrying a woman who gave birth to Travis, but the couple split up by the time their son was just 2. Gary disappeared for several years and at one point was living in a van. He didn't reemerge in Travis's life until he was 6 and was finally sober. It was at that age Travis started living with his dad, but he struggled in school due to psychotic episodes, and it wasn't until he was an adult that he was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, a milder form of autism. Travis soon found himself entrenched in drugs and alcohol, and he was in and out of treatment centers between the ages of 11 and 15. Gary transferred Travis to special schools, but that did little to alleviate his personal problems. To distract himself from external events in his life, Travis did find comfort in one thing: music. His father, Gary, recalled to Leo Weekly, "I had a little recording set up at home. When he would get all whacked out, he'd get into his room and record these songs acoustic. I was just blown away by it." That's when he went ahead and said he would take the bull by the horns doing the acoustical stuff. It was his therapy and his way of communicating. It was in the early to mid-90s Travis met bassist Jesse Vest. They grew up in the same neighborhood in Charlestown. A few years later, he met drummer Matt Tall, and they bonded over their shared love of music, especially bands like Metallica and Pantera, and they went on to form the group Bad Dreams. It proved to be a nice escape for the teenagers. Tall remarked what life was like in Charlestown, telling an interviewer, "It's a hole in the ground, about 2,000 people. A bunch of it's housing projects. They were built for the ammunition plant in the 30s. There's a lot of people on welfare. It's real negative. Everybody's parents are on drugs or alcohol. It's the kind of place where you have to stick together as kids." The trio soon formed another band called Dead Reckoning, with its members claiming they sounded more in line with Metallica's 4th album and Justice for All. It was the same year that Meeks left Charlestown for Louisville, Kentucky, after his father remarried. Travis set up shop in a bedroom with an acoustic guitar and a 4-track recorder and a lot of free time. Meeks spent many late nights working on his music, giving some comfort to his dad after a few turbulent years. Meeks told the Courier-Journal, "Everything was a big mess at one point. I was in a lot of pain and torment. It was nothing anyone had done to me. I did it to myself. Everything about me changed when I moved to Louisville. I was alone a lot. I didn't know anybody, so I wrote a lot. Jesse and Matt, during this period, started driving to Louisville to visit Meeks and work on new music. Meeks wanted a new band name, so he came up with Days of the New and also recruited Louisville native guitarist Todd Whitener. Originally, the plan was for the band to be electric, but the demos that Meeks had come up with were on acoustic guitar and elicited such a good positive response that he decided to unplug his guitar. By this point in time, Meeks had written the whole Days of the New first album by himself, but his bandmates were a little apprehensive about the change in sound, with Vest telling an interviewer, "Me and Matt were kind of reluctant to go with the mellower sound, but we learned to incorporate the rhythm section to more melodic tones." So where did the name Days of the New come from? Well, Jesse Vest told the Albuquerque Journal, "We were in a negative environment. Things were not going right. When Travis moved to Louisville, we started to go out there and got a new outlook on things. It was a new era for us. Days of the New. It's a weird way to word it, but it suits us." The band soon started playing shows around Louisville, and Meeks' vocal style was seeing a lot of comparisons to Alice in Chains frontman Lane Staley and The Doors' Jim Morrison. In fact, around the time of their first album having success, Meeks actually recorded a cover of The Doors' tune The End with the surviving members of the band.
Can you picture what will be so...
Days of the New ended up finding a management team, according to Billboard, after their first 3 gigs. The band's big break happened at the Harvest Showcase Festival in 1996, which highlights emerging talent for music industry scouts. In attendance was an A&R man from Arista Records who liked the group, but he didn't think his bosses at the label would be interested in signing the band. So the next night, that A&R guy bumped into REM and Nirvana producer Scott Litt at an industry function and recommended he go check out Days of the New. It just so happened that Litt had just started his own label called Outpost Recordings, which was distributed by Geffen Records. Outpost around this time had electronic act Crystal Method and country group Whiskeytown, which was fronted by Ryan Adams.
Didn't know how to respond before the blankets of snow.
It turned out Litt was longtime friends with Rick Smith, who co-managed Days of the New. He made a call to Smith to inquire about the band. 2 days later, Litt was on a flight to Louisville and was standing in Travis Meeks' basement seeing the band play their songs. But Litt was only interested in signing the group to a development deal and giving them some money to record a demo tape and maybe buy some new instruments and equipment. But then Meeks gave Litt a demo tape of 10 songs he had worked on by himself, and that development deal turned into a record deal. Days of the New signed a 6-album deal with Outpost Recordings with a 2-album guarantee, something that was pretty rare at the time. I also want to note that the guys weren't even 18 at the time of signing their recording contract. But recording their first album wasn't an easy process. Meeks later recalled to Leo Weekly, bringing the band together Days of the New was one of the most difficult things because the music was already written. The guitar player didn't know how to play acoustic guitar. I had to teach the drummer how to lay back and understand the acoustic guitar was the main instrument. To make that first album happen, I had to pull my hair out to make these guys focus. There was an Edmonton Journal article around 1997 or 98 that claimed that Travis Meeks already had a 5-year-old daughter by this point in time, and that drummer Matt Tall, who was 18, was already divorced and had to leave the recording sessions of their first album to witness the birth of his daughter. The members more or less had already dealt with or were dealing with serious drug and alcohol issues, with Tall telling the Edmonton Journal, "We've all done drugs. We've been through being strung out. We've all been through horrible relationships and psycho women. We've all seen hard things." The members added how by this point in their lives, they felt like they were in their late 20s, given their life experiences. Despite all the personal issues going on in the band members' lives, producer Scott Litt was impressed with the band's work ethic. He recalled one thing that Travis Meeks told him, adding, "Just because we're kids doesn't mean we can't be professional." Litt added, "That was cool. I deal with people twice his age who don't get it." Days of the New's debut album, which is self-titled and sometimes referred to as the Orange or Yellow album, came out on June 3rd, 1997. Despite the group using acoustic guitars, their music was never described as folk. Instead, it was described as dark, deep, and hard. The press also made note of Meeks' Eddie Vedder meets Johnny Depp appearance. There was also a mix of good and bad reviews with their debut album. Some of the critics focused on the group's age, criticizing them for being a hard rock version of bubblegum stars like Hanson, or America's answer to Australian grunge like Silverchair. Meeks told an interviewer, "People always ask me how a 17-year-old can write the things I do, and I never really have an answer for that. I can only write from deep inside, things that have happened to me, things that haunt me. You can change in some ways as you grow older, but what's inside never really changes at all." The band were also referred to in the press sometimes as being the anti-Hanson or the folky Soundgarden. One writer even referred to their brand of music as diaper rock, while another article dubbed them as cub rock grunge. The first single released from their debut album, Touch, Peel, and Stand, ended up topping the mainstream rock tracks chart for a whopping 16 consecutive weeks, a record at the time. It became the band's best-known song, and it was later named the greatest of all-time mainstream rock song by Billboard magazine. There are only 3 other bands who've spent more time atop the mainstream rock tracks chart at the #1 spot. One of them is Three Doors Down, who had not 1 but 2 hits, including Loser, as well as the song When I'm Gone, which spent 17 weeks atop the chart. The other 2 groups include Creed with Higher and Stained with It's Been a While. The second single released from their debut album, The Downtown, which was about drug use, also peaked at #1 on the mainstream rock tracks chart and peaked at number 19 on the modern rock tracks chart. Bring me down, bring me down. Yeah. The final third single, Shelf in the Room, peaked at number 3 on the mainstream rock tracks chart and number 22 on the modern rock tracks chart. The album, for its part, ended up peaking at number 54 on the Billboard album chart, and at the end of the day, it went platinum in the States and sold about 1.5 million copies worldwide. During the promotion cycle for their first album, Meeks was hinting at where the band could go in the future, telling MTV, "If you listen to the current album, there's a world flavor to it, an ethnic feel. There'll be a lot of that on the new record too, and female vocals will match that. There'll be more Spanish influences on the guitar, and we're going to have a Celtic feel present also." The press was also making note of how Days of the New was really just a Travis Meeks solo project, since he was the creative genius behind the group. This also foreshadowed the future of the band. The band's success and their first major tour brought about a lot of internal problems. During the tour to support their debut record, MTV was starting to report that following a canceled show in Florida, the band members appeared physically injured, with some of them sporting black eyes and bruises after an apparent brawl with each other. Their record label and management, as well as Meeks' bandmates, saw firsthand of just how unpredictable and volatile his behavior could be. In the summer of '98, Days of the New got a strange opening slot, touring with both Metallica and Alice in Chains guitarist Jerry Cantrell. Alice in Chains was on a break, and Jerry was promoting his first solo record, Boggy Depot. In fact, the constant Alice in Chains comparisons to Days of the New doesn't really make this billing seem odd, at least with Cantrell. Given, though, that the band's sound was drastically different from Metallica, Meeks criticized the billing, claiming that the band should have instead been touring with Dave Matthews. Ahead of Days of the New's tour with Metallica, Meeks ended up lashing out against his bandmates, claiming they were holding him back, and also claimed he would be firing them in the future. But label executives scrambled to brush off Meeks' claims in the press, but by the end of 1998, the original lineup of the band was done. Following the dissolution of the original lineup of Days of the New, Meeks posted a rambling message on a fan board where he apologized for, and I quote, giving people the impression that Days of the New was a band and promoting it as a band format, going on to say it wasn't truly a band format. It's my fault for leading you on and setting you up to get attached to the prior members. Meeks claimed that his bandmates left over being jealous of him because he wrote all of the songs and collected a bulk of the group's publishing money. Days of the New have since released 2 more albums, 1999's Green and 2001's Red, before taking a long hiatus. Frontman Travis Meeks has struggled with personal issues in his life, but is set to be doing better, and he's also performed shows over the last 2 decades. Meanwhile, his old bandmates started the band Tantric, who you might remember from the 2000s, who had a bunch of hits during the decade, including the #1 song, Breakdown.
Someday I know the breakdown. Tell me again, am I awake now? Maybe you can find.
Days of the New did end up reuniting with their original lineup, though, in 2014, with plans of releasing new material, but it was a complete mess, as Meeks was still struggling with personal issues at the time. That does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again in Rock and Roll True Stories. Take care.